And you know, I've heard people argue, unsuccessfully, that the church doesn't really need us. It doesn't need our meager gifts or our talents, that the church will get along perfectly fine without us. And that's probably true. But you and I, we need the church. And we not only need the church, but we need to become involved in its activities. What marvelous, marvelous blessings we miss out on when we pass up on opportunities to be deeply involved in the church and to serve God in the way that we know He wants us to serve Him. I had a fellow complain to me one time that our church, not at Oakwood or somewhere else, our church didn't spend enough time visiting the sick and the shut-ins and the people in the hospitals. And I talked to him about this for a few minutes, and I discovered that he himself had never done any visiting. And so I asked him why. He said, because the preacher never asked me to. And so I suggested that he might want to go out and do some visiting on his own. And I said, why don't you take this a step further? Why don't you call the preacher in the morning? I said, shock his socks off. Tell him, say, preacher, listen, the next time you go out visiting, I'd like to go with you. And you know what he told me? He said, that's not my responsibility. That's the preacher's job. It's his responsibility to ask me to do things like that. Well, isn't that a strange attitude to have? You see, some of us have it all wrong. And we lay folks need to remember that the preacher has a number of responsibilities. One of them is to preach, to teach, and to equip the laity for ministry. Did you get that? Did you hear that last part? Preacher's responsibility is to equip the laity for ministry. And that's because the business of serving God, the business of ministering, is partnership. It's something we should be doing together. It has to be, because it simply will not work any other way. In our ministry, whether we're ordained or not, is to be of service to God and His church in any way that we can, in any way that we are able. But too often, we want to pick and choose and decide exactly when, where, and how we would be willing to serve. A story I heard a time back tells about a fellow who approached a cab driver in New York City, and he said, I want you to take me to London, England. Of course, the cabbie thought the fellow was nuts. And he said, there's no way I can drive a taxi cab across the Atlantic Ocean. And the fellow said, I understand that. But what we'll do, we'll go on down to the pier, we'll put your taxi on a freighter, and when we get to Liverpool, you can then drive me to London, and I'll pay you whatever is on the meter. Well, the cab driver still thought the guy was crazy, but he took him up on it, and they did that. And when they arrived in London, the fellow, good to his word, paid what was on the meter and gave him a good tip. But now the cab driver started getting real worried because he had blown some of the money that he'd gotten. There he was driving around in London, worrying about how in the world he was ever going to get his taxi back to New York. And he was driving around there, and would you believe it? The very same fellow flagged him down again. I said, listen, I want you to drive me back to New York. Well, the fellow couldn't believe it. Was good luck. I mean, this was an answer to his prayer. Here he was stuck an ocean away from home. Now this man wanted to pay him to go back home. And then the fellow said, well, what we'll do, we'll go on down to the pier. And he said, I know all that. I've been there. He said, but exactly where is it you want to go to in New York? And the fellow said, Brooklyn. I want to go to 104th Street in Brooklyn. And the cabbie started shaking his head sadly and said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take you. He said, yeah, I just really and truly don't like driving in Brooklyn. Well, I know that's a silly story, but I think it's an illustration of some of the tunnel vision that we lay people have when it comes to the church, where we stubbornly insist on doing things our way, only our way. or we're not going to do it alone. And the result is that we often pass up some of the most wonderful opportunities that are before us. I promise you, those of us who refuse to drive in Brooklyn are going to miss out on some marvelous, marvelous blessings. Now, we all know that the primary mission of the church is to win souls to Christ. And I think that's exactly the area. That's the place where so many of us lay people fall flat on our faces. Some believe that telling people about the saving grace of Jesus Christ is what we hire our preachers to do. And it is. And most of them do a remarkable job of it. But I'll let you in on something. And not be a secret. In some areas, we lay people can do a much better job of that than can our pastors. You know why? Not because we're any better at it, but simply because of the numbers. Simply because there are so many more of us than are of them. So many more laity than there are clergy. And because of that, we ought to be able to reach out to a far greater number of people, sharing the wonderful, exciting message of God's love and His grace. History tells us that in the year 490 BC, during the Persian Wars, the Greek army defeated a large Persian force at a place called Marathon, 26 miles outside the city of Athens. And it was unquestionably the most important and decisive battle of the war because the citizens of Athens were naturally apprehensive about it because their very existence and the existence of their city hinged upon the way this battle turned out. And so the Greeks did win that battle. And a soldier by the name of Phidippides was ordered to run the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to bring the good news of his victory to the people. Now, it was a torturous, grueling run, but he did it. He ran 26 miles. As he reached the city, the people anxiously gathered around him to hear the news, to hear this message, whatever it might be. He was able to gasp out just one word. Victory, he said. And then he collapsed, and he died. Some time ago, I saw a cartoon that bore a dangerously close relationship to the way some of we Christians act today. The cartoon I saw showed the same run of Phidippides running after a group of citizens, waiting at the gate of the city, anxiously waiting to hear the news of their fate. And then the cartoon showed the runner with a rather dumb look on his face. And he said, I forgot the message. I forgot the message. Can you imagine that happening? Here with the distraught Athenians waiting to hear the message, the words that literally meant life or death to them. And then the confession of this not too bright individual who said, I forgot the message. How could that happen? How could that possibly happen? How could anybody forget or fail to deliver so important a message? Well, that cartoon applies, I believe, to all of us to some degree at some time or another, because whether we're preachers or not, we are all messengers, and we have such a wonderful, exciting, and important message to deliver. But too often we find that we've forgotten the message, or at least for one reason or another, we fail to deliver it.